Produced by Cool Kitten. Stages of a Sister's Grief. Written by James. Chapter 2, Left Behind, and later the song Beat It by Michael Jackson, sung by James. After I heard the news of my brother's passing, I spent the rest of that evening in complete denial. I wandered around my room some, but mostly I hung out in the walk-in closet. I did not know then, at that point in time, why I loved being in there so much, but I sensed it was because he was in there. Now, some people know this about me, but most do not, because I do not like making people feel uncomfortable. I'm telling you now because this is a big part of this story and my grieving process. You see, the first and only time I have seen a dead family member, or a friend for that matter, as an in-life spirit, was when my grandfather died. I was only 12. Now, of course, I had heard and seen many spirits before that, but this one was related to me. It was nighttime, and I was having a dream about Ireland and castles. I was running through a large green-as-can-be field. I was singing some song I can't to this day figure out the title of. I'm pretty sure it's not an actual song, but I have for many years tried to find it. Now sing it in the style of Lay Me Down to Sleep. Now I put my body to sleep, my soul will travel to you to keep. In that place you won't see my face, instead you will see a light in its place. I know, creepy kid I was. Okay, still am, and sometimes I talk like Yoda. I woke up to someone tapping my leg. It was Carl, my grandfather. I sit up and say, "Grandpappy, what are you doing here?" He says, "Jamie, I do not mean to frighten you." I interrupt saying, "I'm not frightened." He responds, "Jamie, do not interrupt people. It is not proper. As I was saying, I am here to tell you to help people. You get to see me and say goodbye, but in the future you will get to help others say goodbye." I had no idea what he was going on about. I was about to ask him what the heck he was saying when my father got up and asked me who I was talking to. He said, "It's late, and you're waking people up." I replied, "Grandpappy." He looks at me with a very pale face and starts towards the kitchen phone. Before he even got to the kitchen, the phone rang. It was around 2 a.m. or so. I couldn't hear the call, but I know my dad collapsed to some body part and started sobbing. My mother consoled him. I've tried to talk to my parents about that night, but both keep, to this day, telling me I was dreaming. I know I was not. I do not know why I saw him and no one else, except maybe because he adopted my dad. Maybe it was the beginning to my journey. I have not since that night seen a family member or a friend, not even my husband. I catch a photo here and there, but never in person. I can, however, see or hear them in dreams, hence the many dreams I have had of Brian. This gets me back to my story of him and my unrelentless grief. Again, I cannot see Brian. I can't even hear him. I have, since he has passed, done 2 readings for people who have lost loved ones, one to cancer and one to suicide. They are helpful to me, but I prefer not to bother people with that kind of thing. I truly sense Brian in my walk-in closet area and other places, but I can't hear him. So I did what any medium would do and pulled out my spirit box. I let it run for a long time, and I thought I heard him, but I couldn't understand any of it. I was just so angry my parents didn't fly me out to Oregon to take Brian home that I couldn't concentrate. I was so angry that I couldn't say goodbye. I thought if I was there and saw him that I might realize this is real and stop being in denial. I was hoping if I was in the apartment I could see if it was the same as in the dream. I was hoping to see him again. I was hoping to stop being angry. My parents didn't even think of me. They didn't think about my closure. They didn't think about the pain and the need to not only be with them, but to be with Brian, to be in his apartment, to see and meet his friends and coworkers. Then there's my cousin. She was there. She went with no permission to pick up my brother's cat from the shelter. Riley, my youngest son, wanted that cat. Try explaining why he can't to a grieving child. I just felt so betrayed by all 3. They all got to be there, be near him again. Now I know none of them had any ill will, but none of them thought of me either. I stayed behind to take care of my kids. I made the phone calls and announcements. I paid attention to the obituary for mistakes. I received the emails from coworkers. I went to the funeral home here and set that up, and I even signed the contract. I was the worker bee, and not one thing I wanted was coming forth to happen. It felt awful, but I knew I had to keep everyone from losing it. I did the same thing with my husband's death. It sucked. The very next day after the phone call, I asked my mother if I could post on Facebook about Brian. I told her I wouldn't give details, of course, but people needed to know, and making phone calls was not going well for me. She said yes, and so I did. The first person to contact me was Brian's childhood friend, Kenny M. His mother, Charlotte, used to babysit both Brian and I, and both of them had a big part in molding who I am and who Brian was. Was. That is such a hard thing to say. Was. He is a was now. Anyway, I could sense Brian was happy to know that his longtime friend had such fond memories of him. Brian never admitted or even asked for attention, but deep down inside he loved it. He'd be proud of the letter Kenny wrote for the funeral. That's another chapter, though. This is when I started to hear the third song coming from my closet. I didn't understand it at first, but as the days went on, I finally figured out why. It was Beat It by Michael Jackson. Brian, growing up in the 80s and 90s, went through many musical styles, but one of my favorite memories of him was him dressing up like Michael from the video Beat It. Kenny eventually posted a photo of himself wearing an MJ shirt standing next to Brian. At the funeral, my mother had a photo up of my cousin and him both dressed as characters from the videos. Here I am, wearing my anger like a suit. I was dressed in constant spite, envy, and blame. This one took me a while, but after I saw the photos, I got why he played it. I already recorded this song, so I went back and listened to it carefully. And he was basically telling me not to bring that around here. I'm so big on letting things go and doing right in the moment, but here I was, doing just the opposite. To this day, I still have not gotten over being the forgotten one. Now I know I need to, but at least I started by telling my mother how it felt. How I didn't get the part of the grieving process. How maybe if I was there I might have been able to pick up something, like medium-wise. I could have found a clue or a hidden note. To sum it up, I told her how it felt to be left back, all alone, and she felt bad. She promised not to leave me behind ever again. She will, though, because eventually my parents will also pass, and I'm afraid to be alone. I'm afraid to be left behind. Thank you. As you know, this is my story of grief and how my brother visits me with music only I can hear. It may sound crazy, but it's my story. Stay tuned for another acoustic song recorded by me. They are all full of mistakes and raw, just like me. I love and miss you more and more as time grows. Next up, Chapter 3. The Relationship, From Tear to Torn. Produced by Cool Kitten. Written and read by James. Written on August 22nd, 2018. Stay tuned for the song Beat It, sung by James. Originally performed by Michael Jackson.